I think the biggest challenges that we see, and something that we're really going to focus on in 2020, is the validation and proof of concept. How can we really help entrepreneurs spend more time and focus on the validation, the customer discovery, those critical steps that many, many tech entrepreneurs leap over?
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host Tyler Kelly. Today we're at Venture Cafe St. Louis, and if you don't know, Venture Cafe is the largest gathering of entrepreneurs anywhere in the world. So on a Thursday evening, if you're near Venture Cafe, I suggest you go check it out. I'm very excited because today we have Mary Louise Helbig with us. Mary, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you. And if it makes it easier, you can call me ML. Most people do.
All right. Well, Mary Louise's business experience spans over 20 years in the entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial roles within diverse industries, such as telecommunication, education, financial, and healthcare. She's a strong supporter of St. Louis's entrepreneurial community. She's been an engaged mentor for capital innovators and Prosper, and she served as a program manager for CET's Square One program. In 2014, she joined ITEN.
Yes.
As an entrepreneur in residence.
That's right. Yes.
And then a few years later became the executive director.
Yeah. August of 17, I became the executive director.
Well, we're happy to have you on the show, Mary Louise.
Thank you. Thank you for what you guys do, and thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate it.
So I want to find out more about ITEN, but first, that term entrepreneur in residence, I think was very interesting in your bio. So I'm curious to find out about your entrepreneurial journey and where you got started. Sure.
So really early in my career, and when you were reading my bio, I sound like a very confused person, don't I? So early in my career, I had the very fortunate opportunity to work for a gentleman who was an entrepreneur in the telecommunications industry. It just by happenstance, I started working in his company and then actually started working directly for him and with him in a business development role, and then became part of his mergers and acquisitions team. And so I think that real initial experience is really what, at the time I didn't realize it, but really was what taught me a lot about entrepreneurship and why I love working in the startup space. So it wasn't until, a few jobs later, different kind of positions and roles, and I did work in corporate America, and I've also worked for several different tech startups that it really kind of came together for me that I like this startup stuff. I love this startup stuff,
Wow. So ITEN's been around for a while.
11 years, yeah.
What is ITEN? What do you guys do?
Sure. So ITEN is in its 11th year, and we're a nonprofit organization that helps tech startups and basically help them through the commercialization process. So whether someone has an idea in their head, they're building a prototype, they have an MVP and they're taking it to market, or they're going out to raise money, we have programs and services that help tech entrepreneurs free of charge. It's a pretty unique thing, not only in St. Louis, but throughout the United States, that we kind of serve this role, and a big part of what we do is really work with the broader entrepreneur ecosystem, so that when an entrepreneur comes to us and they need help, we can figure out what stage they're at, what programs, what resources, what mentors would be helpful to them. But we also point them out to the community. So we point them out to the other community members, the other support organizations that can really provide valuable programs and services to them, given the stage that they're at and the needs that they have.
And what's this ITEN stand for?
So ITEN stands for IT Entrepreneur Network.
All right.
Yeah. So we are focused on helping scalable, innovative tech companies. So we work with companies across industry sector. So we might be working with a health tech company or a fintech company or an ed tech company or just a general business tech, right? But they've got to have innovative, scalable tech. So we don't necessarily work with a company that's just using technology to enable their business, right? But yeah, so very, diverse, I guess you could say, I don't know if portfolio is the right word. We really call our companies our member companies, really diverse types of companies solving different problems and needs.
So you mentioned the word scalable.
Yeah.
What makes, pre-working with ITEN,
right?
Like what makes a potentially scalable business model?
Yeah. In simplest terms, it's really somebody that's creating an application that solves a problem that can be used on a broad scale basis. And broad scale meaning nationally or even internationally with, millions potentially of users on a given platform. So what it's not is if you ever worked in a company and you developed an application really specific to your business needs and solving your business's problems, but it's really not for anybody else to use outside your four walls.
That's an interesting thought, because we always think of scalable businesses are good, but at the same time, some very specific niche businesses also seem to be very successful.
Yeah.
So I'm curious your thoughts on something like that.
Well, yeah, and also too, I guess I should say on scalability, it's also about using technology to deliver the service or the product or the service. And as you grow the business, you don't have to grow your infrastructure, your employee base, right? So it's a very from a scalability standpoint, also the technology provides a very cost-effective and efficient model to go out and then support a very large, diverse client base. Mm-hmm. So the economics of the model works really well too.
So what are some of the success stories that you all have had at ITEN? Yeah,
so if you've heard of Label Insights, that's one of our companies. They are doing very well. They're in the hundreds of employees now and tens of millions in raise. They're a company, they are a B2B company, so honestly, you may not have heard of them specifically. And a good number of our companies are B2B, so they're not the business to consumer that you're going to see the brand and everybody's going to be touching it necessarily. But what they do is labels on food products. If you've ever really read labels, even though there's ingredients included, you start reading some of that and you're like, what the heck is this, right? Well, they actually take food product labeling down to the very detailed and specific level. And they have been working with the FDA. And then most recently this week, one of our companies that has a blockchain program application for construction companies and managing when construction companies or construction projects, I should say, are going on. There's oftentimes a lot of subcontractors and a lot of different project milestones that have to be tracked in order to get payment or to approve to go to the next level. So they're using their technology to help manage that process, and they just raised $3.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
And these are homegrown St. Louis businesses.
Yeah. Started here in St. Louis. So that's exciting to see those opportunities. And one of the things I think sometimes with particularly in the tech space that I get very excited about is just even sometimes the entrepreneurs that we see, they may not be starting up like the next, they may not be the next unicorn per se, but they're starting up good, solid businesses, and they're building them here in St. Louis. So even if it launches and it becomes a successful small or medium-sized business, I think that's a home run. That's a home run for them. That's a home run for us in St. Louis and our community because it develops the workforce. It provides higher paying jobs, than average wage jobs. So those are the things that excite me every day, and that's why I get excited about going to work.
Yeah, I love what you said, and I think that's really exciting because a lot of times the stories that get told are those great big success stories that seem out of reach for even the average entrepreneur.
Right. They refer to them as unicorns for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, I'd be happy to have the next unicorn walk in my front door and, would love them and support them on their journey. But the reality is we really try to look at each entrepreneur and their company and their idea as, can this turn into a viable business? And understanding what that means, for them as far as scale and things like that. But if we can keep standing up those viable businesses in our communities, that's a wonderful thing. So like if you use sports analogies, I'll take the guy that hits a single every time he gets up at bat, versus somebody that, you're waiting for just every time to hit a home run, right? Because those singles, those people getting up hitting the singles are driving the people around the bases and then they're scoring the runs. So
I'm sure you've seen a lot of, and been able to deal with a lot of entrepreneurial challenges just in working with a diverse group of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Like, what are some of the consistent challenges that entrepreneurs face, specifically like in IT startup world?
Right. Do you want me to tell you what they think they are or what I think they are?
No, I mean what you think they are. You're the expert.
Sometimes that's different. That can be different. Oftentimes, what we hear from our entrepreneurs, and I think we all hear, those of us that work with entrepreneurs, is, I can't get access to money. I will debate that. And I will say that you can, if you understand, what you have to do to validate and do your proof of concept on your business and take it through those stage gates in order to make the ask, and understanding what ask you can make at what time. Because I can't tell you how many times we onboard anywhere from 5 to 8 companies a month, and half of the entrepreneurs in the room will say, well, I have this idea and I want to go talk to a VC and ask him for $1 million to help me build my product. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. So some of it is education. I think one of the biggest challenges for the entrepreneurs in our space and tech is that it really is can be, relatively speaking, easy to launch a tech product. Someone said to me, well, if you have a laptop and, you can basically launch your product from, having just a laptop, right? But that doesn't mean the product you launch is a good product. So what we see, I think the biggest challenges that we see, and something that we're really going to focus on in 2020, is the validation and proof of concept. So in between idea and prototype, what are you doing to make sure that this fabulous idea that you think you have is truly a fabulous idea? Or it is a fabulous idea, but, you need to tweak it. And how do you need to tweak it? So how can we really help entrepreneurs spend more time and focus on the validation, the customer discovery, those critical steps that many, many tech entrepreneurs leap over? Mm-hmm. They just like, I have this idea and I got this prototype built. And, in some cases, we've seen people waste a lot of money and time. They spend, maybe anywhere from $20,000 to $100,000 only to find out the product or the prototype that they just built has to be trashed or significantly modified. And now they're going backwards.
Or that there's just no market.
Yeah, because what they thought their product was and the market for it, did not align. And, we see this all the time. CB Insights does reports on this. And the top reason that tech startups fail, they quote, is they didn't effectively validate market need, like 40-something%. But if you also look at the ones underneath that, they also go to the point that it's about not understanding and validating market need and talking to customers. Wow. And when we say talking to customers, I had a conversation with somebody the other day. I said, so how many customers have you talked to about this? And they're like, oh, I've talked to all of my friends, who are potential customers. And I'm like, yeah, no, maybe not really. So it's just understanding that there's a step in there that is really important and in your best interest to take that step and take that time and use that and apply that discipline before you just kind of leapfrog over it.
It makes me think, what's the crowdfunding is an interesting model because it validates the market first, right? Yeah, and that typically happens in those earlier, in that kind of stage where you're going out to the market, and it provides a feedback mechanism. And particularly if part of your offering is to put the product in your customers' hands, because they're going to definitely turn right back around and tell you what they think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow.
What are some other practical ways that somebody can do that? Is it as simple as like you said, just putting product in people's hands and watching them use it and listening to them?
It is really about talking to your customer. I mean, if you can put it in their hands, that's always good, but you can't. Sometimes you're not that far along yet. So even just if you can't put it in their hands, sometimes even just drawing it, and even if it's an app, to show somebody, to say, well, if you had this and you show them pictures, I've used PowerPoints before to do that, right? So even though I've been involved in tech startups, I don't write code. I am not a technical person. I was always the operations person, but so you don't have to make it harder than it really is. But I think the real key is sitting down and talking to them and listening and not selling them. This isn't a sales process. This isn't, I'm going to sit down and sell you why I've got the best idea, today. It's sharing with them what it is and asking them what they think about it.
That's
and listening.
That's an interesting point, because I've heard this said on another episode, and it hurts me as a marketing person. But if somebody told us they hate when marketers get involved early, because then you don't have a good product. Like you just have good marketing.
Advertisers. Yeah, because it creates a false market.
Yeah,
the marketers are.
But don't be hurt. I'm a marketer too. So, but I think it is about when you're gathering information, you have to listen. Yeah. That's just that stage, right? So if you do a good job at that, and you collect really good information and you collect what resonates with that customer and what's important and compelling to them, then not only is your product design going to be better, but so is your marketing and your messaging. Mm-hmm. So it's doing that research, almost like focus group kind of, that then you turn around and use in marketing, right? Yeah. Yeah. So that's what's really key and important. And that's something we're really, in 2020, we're really going to be focused on and committed to really, we already do it, but I think we want it to, we already do those things, but we want to take it to the next level. And we want it to be really strong. So speaking of 2020, what's coming up for ITEN that you're excited about? Well, that's one thing that I'm very excited about. There's two other things I'm excited about. And I'm going to talk ahead of myself because we're still kind of in the planning stages for 2020 and kind of looking at things. And of course, we always have to go out and find funding because as a nonprofit, we are able to provide our programs and services free to entrepreneurs because of our fabulous donors and sponsors. So it's building on the program side. It's building up that validation and proof of concept area of our programming, making that even more robust. It's also looking at ways when companies are in that stage and they need to go out and do market research, or they might need help building, hiring somebody to help them do their wireframes or even a prototype. At that very early stage, companies might need anywhere from, say, $5,000 to $20,000 to get some of that work done. And looking at ways that we can get access to funding for them. And so there's some programs out there that I've been watching and are doing very well. The Fundamentals program at BioGenerator is one of those programs. They're focused on life science. So we would like to do that for the tech startups. So that's the other piece, which those two kind of go hand in hand. And then the other thing is really being a better, old school term, welcome wagon for tech entrepreneurs in the St. Louis area. So as I mentioned earlier, we have this really robust ecosystem here, but it's so big, it's also overwhelming. So when tech entrepreneurs come in and they look at, I don't know if you've guys seen the ecosystem map on our website with it looks like somebody took ink and, splattered. It's amazing. There's over 80 entrepreneur support organizations in St. Louis, and that map has grown by a factor of 4 in 5 years. When we were doing that map 5 years ago, there were only like 20 dots on the map. Now there's over 80, and there's already more being added on.
And it's highly curated.
Yeah. But think about being an entrepreneur and you're just challenged with trying to start your business. And then somebody says to you, look at this, all these resources are available to you. And you look at that map and you go, wow, that's great. Holy cow,
Yeah.
what the heck? I mean, like where's the point of entry? So we would really, for tech startups, like to do a better job of that and really kind of raise our hand in the community and say, if you've got a tech startup, point them our way. We will be their welcome wagon. We will, of course, provide the resources and programs and services that we can to them, but we'll also turn around to our community members and say, you should go over here. You should talk to or go to the Square One program, or if you're a life science company, go talk to BioGenerator or talk to Harrierator at Fundamentals, and just really point them in the right direction. And we're looking at creating a mentor role that is solely around being like a navigator. So when a company joins ITEN or a startup joins ITEN, we pair them up with a navigator in their first 90 days. And that person is really just helping them find their way.
So I heard recently that I think it was like the New York Times just cited St. Louis as I'm paraphrasing, but a premier startup market.
Yes.
And of course we've heard the Brookings Institute, and just the list goes on and on and on.
Right.
And obviously ITEN's been a huge part of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
What's missing? We always talk about like all the things that we have outside of being more organized and pointing people in the right direction.
Yeah.
What are we missing here in St. Louis?
Boy, that's a good question. I do think it's time. I mean, we are a big and robust ecosystem, and I would really love to see us be able to start tracking. So we do our annual report, and it shows, the number of jobs. 260 jobs were created by our tech startups last year, and they raised $190 million in follow-on funding. But everybody does their own annual report. So telling the St. Louis story needs to be done in a more cohesive way. The St. Louis story needs to be told, not the 80 individual entities telling our own story, because in doing that, we have overlap and we have gaps, right? So I think it's that coordination of understanding where our gaps might be in the ecosystem, understanding how to work and cross-refer entrepreneurs to one another more effectively. So I think it's just kind of that issue. I think if we could really start to address that in 2020, I think that'll continue to allow St. Louis to be in the top tier of tech, innovation, and entrepreneur cities going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great vision. And I think one of the things we've seen that you mentioned is we've seen St. Louis, the ecosystem kind of mature over the last couple of years, which is exciting to watch. So I'm excited to see what happens in kind of this whole storytelling, navigating of what's happening in St. Louis. Yeah. And it's changed too. I mean, so we've been, the level of activity hasn't changed, but the kind of complexion of the entrepreneurs has, in good ways. So we have been very consistently onboarding about 75 companies. I say companies, startups, and entrepreneurs interchangeably, sorry. But basically 75 new member companies roughly a year. Last year we had a record of 94, but it's 75. So that's huge, right? So, I mean, we're getting close to hitting our 1,000 mark, which is really cool. You'll hear about that when we do. I think looking at who's joining, we're seeing, and maybe because in the 10 or so years that we've been doing this, we've cleared out kind of a backlog of startups and entrepreneurs who were there and just getting engaged in the ecosystem, and now people are finding us faster. So the number of really earlier stage companies has grown as far as total number of companies. So probably like 38% are in the idea stage, right? So, but the number of companies or startups has been about the same. Yeah. So
what advice could you offer to an entrepreneur that is listening right now, and they are in the idea stage? They don't necessarily have a business model or understand their market, but they have what they think is a good idea. What should they do?
Yeah. So I honestly, if they're tech, innovative, scalable tech, I would say they should join ITEN, because that is part of what what we do for our entrepreneurs is someone says, I have an idea in my head and I don't know where to go next. And that's part of what we're set up to do is bring someone in and say, okay, you have this idea in your head, and then that's where, we have mentors who we know are the ones that are good at ideation and the early validation and helping those people at that stage start, figure out their journey. But then we'll point them to doing things like 1 Million Cups, where they get up in front of a group of people, community based, and tell their story or share their idea, and they get feedback. And they get to have an ask. So what is your ask of the audience? What do you need help with? So things like that, and House of Genius and Square One. So in addition to ITEN, again, we would point them to those resources, our resources and community resources, so that they can start working through, turning their idea into reality.
So, Mary Louise, how can people get in touch via social, the website, all that good stuff? Yeah,
so the best place to start is our website, which is our name, ITENSTL.org. So it's ITENSTL for St. Louis.org. And on that page, there's two things and I would also say this to this person that might have this idea in their head. You can sign up for our newsletter, which comes out about every 6 weeks. But you can also sign up for Startup Digest. And we curate that publication. It goes out every Monday. And it's a Techstars publication. But it's about the overall entrepreneur and innovation community. So every Monday, you're going to get in your inbox what's going on this week in the innovation and entrepreneur community. So that's because there is so much going on. You guys know this. I mean, I'm leaving here to go to an event and, had to turn down going to an event this after. I mean, there's so much going on. So it's nice to have somebody like us say to you, okay, heads up, here's what's going on this week. So that would be something I would highly recommend. The other thing I'd recommend is a great event that's coming up November 11th. So, we have St. Louis Startup Week, November 1st through 9th. And that week, there's going to be a lot of activities going on. But on Wednesday of that week, November 6th, is Startup Connection. And that's our annual event for the startup community. And that's from 4 to, I think, like 9 p.m. at the Globe Building. And that is all things innovation and entrepreneurship in the St. Louis area. So you're going to see the startup companies, and you're going to see the support and resource organizations. I mean, talk about one-stop shopping. That's a fabulous event.
That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Mary Louise, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
We're excited to hear about ITEN and everything's happening in that community, so we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. All right.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. And if you're in St. Louis, visit us on a Thursday night. Details at vincafstl.org. And connect with us on social at We Are Slam or at Venture Cafe STL. Thanks for listening.
This is where it all begins, so say